All right, joining us for the second time here on Fellowship of the Rink, we got Wes Walz jumping in to fill in some of the gaps here with Joe being MIA here for the week. We're going to talk Wild, but we're going to talk hockey in general, Wes.
Yeah.
Why not just jump right in with what's happening this year? Like, it doesn't make much sense when you look at some of the teams at the top and at the bottom and who won the offseason and the teams that everyone was going to bury. Like, what do you make of it? High level.
Yeah, it's been a crazy, 18, 20 games. I guess we're almost at the quarter pole. And, so you talk about some of the teams that thought that they won the summer, Nashville going out to pick up Marchessault and Stamkos and Brady Shea, and even Edmonton. We play them Thursday night. They went out and picked up Skinner and Arvidsson to try to fill some of the holes from the offer sheet situation that they were dealt with this summer. And that hasn't really panned out either for the Oilers. So, and I think before the season started, I think you and I both said Nashville was going to be right near the top of the league. That hasn't turned out exactly the way we thought it might turn out. But you look at what Washington's doing. I don't think anybody had any clue as to what Washington would do. And Alex Ovechkin, 39 years old, scored his 15th goal in the power play last night, just leading the National Hockey League at 39 in goals. And, there was a lot of talk whether he was going to, I don't know, whether he was going to, get the record, was going to go till next year, or how it was going to work out. But he's got that team on his back right now, and it's incredible. And obviously Winnipeg, they just finally lost 2 games in a row. So they're off to an amazing start, and so are the Wild. And I don't think a lot of people at the beginning of the season chose the Wild to get off to the start they have. And, I actually did think before the season started we were going to surprise some people. And I didn't think it would be quite to this point right now, but I did think that we were going to surprise some people.
And I mean, it's funny that it's Winnipeg and Minnesota that most people didn't have in the top half of their preseason predictions for the Central Division. And
no, nobody. None of the national pundits.
Right.
A few folks that live around here. And just goes to show you got to play the season. You just don't know how it's going to play out. I mean, you look at the Wild situation. It's just goaltending's been a complete flip flop. I mean, we were right near the bottom of the league last year in save percentage. I don't know what we finished, 25th or 26th. Now we're 3rd or 4th between both goaltenders, not just Gus. Mm-hmm. That changes everything, right? All of a sudden, we talk about the power play and different things they've done on the penalty kill. And like we feel, Kaprizov's off to a great start, but goaltending, number 1, number 2, number 3. It's so important in hockey. They're getting the big saves. And, Coach Hynes has talked about making sure this team played with more structure. I think it was very evident. And I mentioned this on the broadcast a couple nights ago. Yes, the Wild were outmanned, not having Ek, Brodin, and Zuccarello in the lineup last game, but against Dallas, and they got their shoes blown off them last year, getting outscored 19-5 or something, but they hung with them. And I know the shots were 2-1, but they were getting the first save, and then the Wild were clearing out rebounds. They didn't take any silly, unnecessary penalties, limited Dallas to 1 power play. Checked smart in the neutral zone. They just gave themselves a chance to hang around. And that's all you expect when you've got guys that are hurt. Last year, that Dallas game, we would have flipped the puck over a glass and gone to 5-on-3 and then wouldn't have got a big save. And then that game could have very easily ended 5-1. It would have ended 5-1 last year. But the structure that Coach Hynes has incorporated here, especially through training camp, has definitely shown up in me watching the Wild this year.
And beyond just the structure, more broadly speaking, is there anything that stands out to you that you've seen that's not even necessarily better, but just very different in contrast from what was being run by Dean Evason prior?
I think the one area that stands out for me, just to contrast between John Hynes and Dean Evason, is you've heard this before, like NHL teams take on the personality of their coaches. Dean Evason's a fiery guy. We saw him behind the bench. And I think the Wild had a lot of players very similar to him when they played. And I think a lot of times during games when things didn't always go great, I felt the anxiety level of the club always seemed to go up a little bit. And we took ourselves out of a lot of games, Scott, last year, I think, because of it. And trust me, I love me some Dean Evason. I think he's an unbelievable coach. I would have loved to have played. Well, I played against him. So, and I played with him actually when I played over in Switzerland for a year. So I know lots about Dean Evason. He can coach me and my teams anytime. But John Hynes' personality is different behind the bench. It's not as animated. Doesn't quite. I mean, you see him lose his temper a little bit, but nothing crazy. And I just sense there's a little bit more of a robotic team where we're all about business. Like there's nothing going to knock us off of our spot. We're just going to continue to come at. We might be down 1-0. We might be down 2-0. I don't see a lot of discrepancy between the games, Scott, from the time the puck drops in the first period to the end of the game.
Yeah. Great
team, Scott, never play the same way all the time. Never. You have to play time and score. That's what the great teams do. That's how you bank an extra 8 to 10 points at the end of the season. And that's how you find yourself in the playoffs or out of the playoffs. And, when you're not disciplined and you're taking extra penalties, you got to play extra guys more, guys get hurt. It's just an accumulative effect that actually really affects the team in the big picture. So you asked me what the difference was just off the top of my head. That was one area that kind of just really stood out to me. Is just basically the personality of the team and how it's, it follows the way the head coach and what he does behind the bench.
That's interesting though, because like, I agree with you. I've seen, you put it robotic. I'd say just like a lot more direct and focused, right? Maybe less emotion, but I wouldn't have ever like tied it to the coaches. But that almost makes me think, did they almost need to have Dean Evason come in first, be the one that kind of got the locker room vibe in check, got everyone in good spirits, just completely changed the culture? And then that next progression is naturally, hey, let's bring in a stoic, like more direct leader like Hynes.
I mean, how do you know? I mean, the shelf life of an NHL coach is 5 years, right? So
is it
Coach
even
Hynes come in, like John Tortorella might be coming in next. You never know. Like that's, you just don't know. And, I was just trying to think, maybe I'm a little biased to the way I feel about the way a bench should be run. It's because I played for Jock for 8 years, those early years. Yeah. And there was no emotion back there. And trust me, there was emotion in the locker room, but he never showed much to the referees or anything like that. So maybe I'm a little bit skewed that way because that's just what I need, because I'm pretty I was an emotional player myself too. If I would have had a coach going off, maybe I would have went off the rails much easier. Jock wouldn't allow it with his players. And so maybe I'm a little biased that way, and that doesn't mean that you can't be a great coach the other way. Like look at Paul Maurice out in Florida. He just won a Stanley Cup. I mean, I'd drive through a wall for that guy. I mean, I just love that guy and how fiery he is behind the bench. And a lot of fiery coaches have had a lot of great success in the NHL. So that's just an answer off the top of my head, and it doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just I just recognized last year we left a lot of points on the table last year just because of just flat out discipline. Teams like in the NFL football that false starts and holding those teams you never see them play at the end of the season in the NFL. It's no different in the NHL. And just the Wild have done an amazing job of just being disciplined in their game and not taking silly penalties. That's pretty much it. It's a big part of why we're sitting where we're at.
So the discipline's in check. Everything's handled behind the bench. Fans were begging for Philip Gustafsson to be traded this summer. Obviously, very fortunate that didn't come to be. This interview is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it, that makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 at checkout to take 10% off your entire order. What do you feel, though, for the goaltending at this point, Wes? Like, obviously, there's a different confidence. Both guys are playing better. Do you see them playing better, making, the defense and the team as a whole look better? Or is there a little give and take where, like, the team in front of them is playing better and giving them better opportunities to perform?
The goaltenders are on top of their game. When you play in front of a goaltender or goaltenders, when you walk out the tunnel and your goalie, you got a really good chance of your goalie being the best goalie on the ice, it breeds a lot of confidence. It really, really does. You come out that tunnel thinking to yourself, if we keep this team tonight to 2 goals, we're going to win. That's it. And when you keep teams to 2 goals because of your mindset, you've got a great goalie, you play a little bit more, maybe a more low risk. If you get up a goal, you don't take some chances. The other team starts to take some chances. You pick up some 2-on-1s, you finish the game. So I've seen a different confidence from the team with their goaltenders. And trust me, I've come out the tunnel before when you're playing a goaltender and he's struggling, when you think to yourself, well, we need 4 tonight, and then you maybe start to cheat for offense. So that's been a big part of it. Obviously the talk during the summer, and I know Billy Guerin talked about it publicly. He never ever said that he was on the trading block. He's listening to everything. I mean, it's his job as a general manager to listen to what other people have to say. And, let's be honest, Gus didn't have a great year last year. No one's blowing him off the doors with an offer. Obviously that's not breaking news. Potentially if someone would have blown his door off, he would have had to probably sit there and seriously look at it. Especially after the season that Gus had last year. But looking back at it now, where we're sitting right now at the quarter pole, the way he's played, one of the best goalies in the National Hockey League, as far as numbers and even passing the eye test, like there's not a lot of luck involved in his game. He just looks solid. And, when we saw Gus in training camp, when we first came back, a lot of the broadcasters, we stand around, we talk a little bit, and we all said right away, Gus looks fit. He looks fit. So you could just tell from looking at his face, he was a little bit lighter. Doesn't necessarily, I don't know how hard he trained. I'm sure he trained pretty hard this summer. And, as you get older, you begin to understand how important building your body up for the year is, because it's a grind, man. I'm telling you, with travel, stress, it's a complete grind. You have to put the work in the summer, if you want to be able to make it through a season. And I always found personally, the harder I trained, the more mentally strong I was, because I knew when I play against someone, I'm ready. You haven't trained harder than me. And I think Gus has got a little bit of that chip in him. He trained like a dog this summer. He took care of his body. He had a lot to prove. He heard the noise out there. There's no question about it. He's a professional athlete. You don't get to this level not overcoming things in your life. We all know how ridiculously talented Gus is. And getting the opportunity to play right now, I'm not sure he really appreciates who's at the other end, like every day in practice, but just being like, there's going to be a time 4 or 5 years from now, I promise you, when Gus is 30 years old, he's going to be like, man, I cannot believe I played with Marc-Andre Fleury. Like, I think that's going to happen later in his career. And just for him to be able to watch how Marc-Andre goes about his business, maybe it's just taken Gus a little bit of time to figure it out. He's only 25, 26. They're goalies. They figure it out sometimes a little slower than players, but no, he's passing the eye test. He's given the team so much confidence, and it's been fun to watch.
It's funny that you bring up the Fleury bit, because last week we had Jesper Wallstedt on, and we asked him, about his first game and what he's going to remember. He's like, honestly, I'm going to tell my kids one day that my first game I ever played, Marc-Andre Fleury was my backup. That's right.
Don't ask me about the game itself.
Exactly. He's like, we don't have to get in the score, but
yeah,
it obviously means a lot for the goalies and the players on the team. Do you see an inkling? Because we know Fleury, he doesn't want to get away from the game of hockey. Do you expect him to be part of the organization in some capacity next year?
I mean, Scott, who knows? I mean, he's just, I don't know. I really don't know how it's going to play out. I know he's building a new house in Vegas. I know he's got 3 young kids. You know, if he is going to retire at the end of the season, I know there's been talk that he is going to retire, and I think everyone's leaning that direction. But who knows? I mean,
with him, who knows? Yeah.
Like if he plays 25 games in this year and wins 15 of the 23 games he plays, and are you going to go out that way? You feel good. Kids love it in Minnesota. Our kids are in school. I mean,
yeah.
You know, you never know how it's all going to play out. You know, you just don't know how it's all going to play out. So I'm sure with his relationship with Billy Guerin at some point, you know, even a year or two, if he does retire, he wants to go back in Vegas and get his house settled in, get the kids settled in. If he wants to come back, I'm sure that door is always going to be open. Why would you not want to have someone like him around the organization to mentor some of these young goaltenders and just even the players, even the younger players around the locker room? So time will tell.
That's for sure. And tonight, so as we record this, it is during the day Tuesday before the matchup in St. Louis. We pulled the trigger. We've got Kaprizov, Ek, and Boldy back together, which I think everyone is definitely excited about, but also sitting back and wondering what happens with the rest of the lineup. I mean, just from your perspective, what we've seen in the past, what we're seeing from some of the depth players this year, do you like the idea of throwing out the juggernaut line and then filling in behind, or do you like having a more balanced lineup?
Well, I'm going to preface all this by saying that obviously with Zuccarello out of the lineup and, you know, Coach Hynes, it's one thing I love about Coach Hynes. He's not married to anything during the course of a game. He's willing to change. Dean, the previous coach, was not quite as anxious to kind of juggle the lines. And again, bias. I played for Jacques Lemaire, who juggled the lines every 3 shifts. So we just, you know, that's kind of, we were able to handle it. It was no big deal. I'm excited, obviously, seeing those 3 guys play together. And the damage that they did last year. We used some charts last year during our broadcast that just, you know, all the analytic stuffs and the offense, like they were one of the top lines in the National Hockey League for like 25, 30 games. And they were absolutely putting on clinics night in and night out. It was just remarkable to watch. And I am very excited to see what those guys can do. Not having last change, playing on the road, putting all your eggs in one basket, I would kind of lean a different direction probably tonight to start the game. I would probably split up Boldy and Kaprizov to start the game. I really did love the Johansson, Ek, Boldy line. I think if you put Kaprizov and have him just kind of, you know, with Rossi and maybe Hartman on the other side and just have, you know, see if they can create something. I still think now that gives the other coach something to look at. Am I going to put my best defensive players against Kaprizov and Rossi and then, you know, just roll the dice maybe with Boldy and Ek and see what they can do? And they've been doing a lot of damage on the road. Or, you know, now having them all together, you can put your 5 best defensive players out there. It makes it a little easier for the opponent. But listen, if you're going to win games in the NHL, you've got to win on the road, and it's got to come from depth scoring. And if there's one area of the game, the Wild's game, that has slowed down here over the last 4 or 5 games, actually 5 or 6 games, the scoring has dropped off from 5-on-5 play. I think if your name's not Boldy or Kaprizov, I think the Wild forwards or players have been in on 5 goals in 6 games. So they're going to need some more offense from some of them secondary guys. But as a Wild fan, and I'm going to be a Wild fan watching very closely tonight, I'm excited about seeing those 3 guys together because they're special.
When we talk about those depth guys, and one that I feel like you probably resonate with a ton, like everyone knows your story coming up the ranks, working your way into the NHL, and the start to Marco Rossi's career, the adversity he went through, the things that he was expected to do in the off seasons and where he's gotten at this point, like hard not to commend the guy. But I want to know from your perspective, what are you seeing that maybe I'm not as more of a layman on the outside, where it feels like he still hasn't quite gotten in the graces of Coach Hynes? Like if there's a key situation, he's probably throwing out a Marcus Johansson instead of a Marco Rossi when, like, I think he's second behind Kaprizov at this point in 5-on-5 points. Like he's producing, he's doing good things. Is there something that's missing or something that I'm not seeing?
Well, we can't forget who he's playing with. He's played the whole season with Kirill Kaprizov.
Yeah.
I mean, he's playing with a great player too. So he's getting, a lot of points. I haven't looked at his primary assists or secondary assists or anything like that. So he's putting up numbers because of who he's playing with too. Let's call it what it is, but Scotty's got this knack. He's got this little thing to his game. He scores, man. He just does. He's one of those guys at the end of the games. Like there's some games like Marco was really quiet tonight, and then you look and you're like, man, he had another. He picked up an assist on that goal, or he scored a huge power play goal the other night that pretty much ended that game against Montreal. He's got that that it thing that he just seems to make a big play at the right time, and that you can't teach that. And I'm a big fan of that. The other thing I really like about his game that's given him an opportunity for his game to flourish in the NHL is he's a very rounded hockey player. He doesn't cheat for any offense. And because of that, the coach is not afraid to play you. So he can actually get on the ice. And, we talk about the numbers and what he's done. I think having Marco Rossi, between Kirill Kaprizov, I think it, whenever anybody talks about balance of lines, you want to have balance. Everyone says balance scoring. That's always that everybody goes to scoring. There's also a balance on the defensive side too. When the coaches are putting their lines together, keeping Ek away from Kaprizov and having Marco Rossi, continue to create offense in him. And he's a responsible player defensively. So I think I just love his 200-foot game. I love what he does. He's and I've mentioned this on the air too. I don't want to bore people with my career, but I had to go over to Switzerland after 6 years and remake myself and blah, blah, blah. It's just been through a lot. And when hard times come, when you've been through a lot, you can lean on, there's a pretty good foundation there. You can't really beat me up anymore. I've already beaten myself up enough. And he's already been through that. And I think because he's had such a difficult start to his career with the COVID situation, a myocarditis, with a heart situation, and the 1 year he played 19, he had 1 assist or something like that, was actually given some pretty good opportunity to play. Everybody thought that he wasn't going to be the player that, he's ended up being. I mean, he had 21 goals last year. 20 goals in the National Hockey League is amazing. He's off to another great start. So, to answer your question, I mean, I agree. I know I heard some of the noise the other about maybe him not being on the ice at the end of the game. And I can tell you myself, having coached high school, I was an NHL coach as well, coach and assistant coach. There's a lot going on a bench. And there are times as a coach, a lot going on. Coaches talking to you, players asking you questions, and you're trying to get guys out on the ice. There are times you miss things. There just really is. And that could have been that time, Coach Hynes didn't have him out there. But anyway, it happens from time to time. I don't think it's too much to worry about. But overall, I love Marco Rossi's game and what he brings to the table.
I couldn't agree more. And we can end on this one, Wes. On that note, I know you've got the experience with coaching, so all of that resonates well. You don't have experience as a GM, and that's okay. I don't either. But you got Rossi having a great year. He's coming up this summer on needing a new contract. We've got, guys like Michael Russo who are regularly speculating, I'm getting the idea that the Wild might trade him because of what they've got in the pipeline, because of what he's going to cost, fitting the roster together, whatever. Do you need to sign him sooner and make sure that the price doesn't keep on going up? Or do you think they're going to sit and wait and just see where the season plays out and completely punt it to this summer to make any decisions?
I don't know how that's obviously going to play out. There are decisions that need to be made. Do you want to commit to Marco Rossi for 7-8 years? Does he want a long-term contract? Is he a number one center? Does he play with enough pace to be a number one center? That's kind of one of the questions. If you look at the top centermen that make $7-8 million a year, those guys are the great players. They're Kirill Kaprizov. Is Marco Rossi that, or is he just one level below? So these decisions that you make as a general manager, given the cap situation that we have, are just very important decisions, right? So I don't know, and I'm sure Billy Guerin has had conversations maybe with Marco's camp to see kind of what they're looking at. Are they looking more long-term? Are they looking for a bridge deal, maybe a 3 or 4 year deal? It's something that makes sense for both teams. to give him another 3-4 years to see what kind of player he is. And then if he ends up being that guy, then he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid. So they have some decisions to make. If Mike Russo's talking about it, there's a good chance he's probably hearing from everybody else around the league too. So that tells you that there's probably a market for him. There's probably a market for him. People watch him. They see him put up numbers. They saw him light it up in the Ontario Hockey League, leading that league in scoring. And so he's a good player. So there's going to be a market for him. Again, it's going to be no different, Scott, for Billy Guerin than what happened this summer. Everybody's, listen, he's trying to build a team. He's trying to build a Stanley Cup team, winning team. He's all about cups. And obviously the cap situation, we got one more year of dead money. And, you got to try to piece this thing together so that when we get out there next year, not saying we can't do any damage right now, because we are. And, who knows, at the trade deadline, maybe pick up a player or two and you could make some noise in the playoffs. That can happen as well too. But bigger picture, you're looking at getting this dead cap money stuff behind us and building for a long-term Stanley Cup champ. Got to make some hard decisions, and you got to make them. I would be surprised. I don't know if it's going to happen this year, if they're going to wait it out and see how. I really don't know enough about it, but I do know he's a great player. I know there's probably a market for him because of his age, and that's why Billy gets the big bucks.
That is why he does. And I appreciate the time, Wes. I'll let you go now, but we're tabling this for next time. Since you brought up the OHL, I absolutely need to pick your brain a bit on what the CHL being eligible to come over for NCAA play is going to mean long term. That'll be a whole conversation.
We'll hit on that one down the road.
Perfect. Appreciate it, Wes.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.